Hi guys, thanks for joining me. Wow, this is quite the project. The tutorial is about 3.5 hours long, and because of that, what I've decided to do is break the tutorial up into parts. Part one will be creation of all of the parts and bits for the BlueBelle. Part two is the assembly of the skirt and the creation of the bodice. And in part three, it's the application of all of the accents and details and finishing touches. The construction of the mannequin is covered in a completely separate video, which is just on my YouTube channel. So do check that out. I didn't include it in this video because otherwise it would just make it an epic length feature film. So what you see in front of you is what comes in the materials kit. There are various sort of bits and kits which you can purchase together as a combo or separately, and I do this so that you only need purchase the bits that you want to create your vision of this project. There is a template set, there is a materials kit, and then there is the mannequin part. Included in the materials kit, you're going to get a couple of pieces of commercial felt in blue and green. You get your pipe cleaners and your wires. You get your fibres, and they come in emerald, moss, bright green, cornflower blue, French blue and pastel blue, and the labels tell you the colour and which part of the project they are used for. You also get these gorgeous, lovely green pearl-headed pins. In addition to those materials, there are a couple of sheets of paper which have your patterns on for the armature shapes and the wing curls and that kind of stuff. You're also going to need some general purpose ball-headed pins, and you're going to need some super glue, and I recommend the super glue gel. Okay, so with that covered, we're going to get on and we're going to start making the BlueBelle. To make the BlueBelle petal skirt, you're going to need your cornflower blue colour, your French blue colour, the pastel blue, this template, which is the big one, and you're going to need your pipe cleaners. I do everything in weights and measures, so that helps me create consistent petals for each one, and I do recommend for that you use a pocket scale. Obviously, the weights and measures that I give are based on the wool that we supply. If you're using your own wool, then those weights and measures may differ very slightly. So let's get on with making our petal. The first thing that I like to do is create the armature or the support for the petal. It's a very, very big petal, so in order to get that beautiful kind of belled skirt, you're going to need some support in there. It uses 2 pipe cleaners for each petal, and there is a pattern, sort of a photocopy of this included in the kit, or it might be available download when you make the purchase. But this will sit very nicely inside the template like so, and there is that customary wiring hole at the end. There's actually a wiring hole at both ends with this template, and this will help you if you want to make anything else with this template. There is a tutorial on my YouTube channel which is a daisy from a snowdrop template, and this is similar in kind of shape. So I've wired it, or put a wiring hole in both ends, so if you wanted to create a huge daisy, you could use this by following the other tutorial. But I digress. We're going to make these armatures for the petals. Now, my BlueBelle uses 7 petals around the skirt. You can obviously put in more or less depending on what you want to do. The armature needs to sit, you don't want it right to the outside of the petal. You want it sort of like this, so that you've got a bit around the outside, and this goes very, very near to the tip. And the wiring hole in this is large enough that you can slip the pipe cleaners through like that. So to make this, you're going to get 2 pipe cleaners. The first one, very simply, you're just going to fold it in half and squish down that rounded tip. The second one, you're going to fold in half and just twist off probably about 3 centimeters about 3 centimeters at the end. Can always be adjusted so that your loop comes down like that into the template, and this bit will stick out the top. Then to make this, actually if I pop that through there it will lay flatter. So decide where you want that loop and then look at your tip there, get it right to the edge, hold it in place and then just wrap up both sides of that loop, holding it in place like so. And that gives you your base sort of petal support. Pop it back in the template. Just make sure, pull that up a little bit. And then you can see that pipe cleaners are a little unruly, but they're going to be felted in place. So it's just an eyeball of an idea at the moment. It doesn't matter how much you've got stuck out here. This is the bit that we want to focus on. Yep, happy with that. So you can see. So you're going to want to make one of those for each petal, and then we're going to come back and start filling the template so that we can create those beautiful petals for the skirt. To begin making the petals, you're going to weigh out about 1.25 to 1.5 of a gram of the cornflower blue and just pull off a little tuft of it. Pop that to one side. Take the main bulk of your fibres and then just distribute it fairly evenly over the length of the template, like so. Then I always like to just start, I'm using a 40 spiral, so a very light needle. Just tack it down very lightly to your surface. Get those fibres inside the template. We're not driving the fibres through. We're just using a little bit of adhesion to the surface just to help hold everything in place while we get it sorted. So just spread them out, make sure they're nice and even. We're going to pay a little bit of attention right here in the tip. Just get your fibres tucked in. Like so. We pay a little bit extra attention to the tip at the moment just because we do want to make sure that we have a nice crisp point to the flower. There we go. And that's very, very light at the moment. You can still see it's really just quite fluffy. Got a little bit of a tip going on there. So back into the template and refine down a little bit more. I'm going to bring in my bit of a workhorse needle, my 38 spiral. You can see it just grabs those fibres down a lot quicker. Work all over it. We're not trying to felt a thumb shape at the moment. We are just getting these initial fibres laid down quite flat to get them all in there. A little bit of attention around the tip. And again, not driving right through. There we go. A little bit more of a refined shape. You can see from the last pass how it's starting to refine down. The other thing I'm not doing is I'm not turning it over, and there's a reason for that. This is going to be done in a sort of sandwich. This is only the first layer, so you don't want to be filling up this template. You just keep to the weights and measures, or eyeball it as best you can. Just getting in that first layer, and we're always felting this way, because if you turn it over, what you'll see is that this side is actually quite even and quite neat. So that's going to become the front, the outside of the petal that we see. This is where all the work goes on. So just carry on refining it down. Like I said, not a hard felt, but we do want that shape to hold. You see from the last pass again, we've got a bit more refinement. The other side's looking very neat. So it's not, if you look, it's not tight felt. It's still very, very loose. Hold it up to the light and just check if you've got any thin spots or gaps. That's what this extra little tuft is. So mainly you sort of use the 1.25 grams in the template, and then this extra 0.25 of a gram is kind of for filling in. So I've got a little bit of a thin spot going on up here. With these larger templates, you can bring in a multi-tool. My multi-tool has 2 needles in it instead of the customary 3. The reason for that is that with 2 you can still felt in a straight line and quite close up to things. If you had the 3, then the other one would be offset and it turns into a bit of a horror show. Broken needles all over the place, you're more likely to hit things. So I tend to stick to the 2. Big open templates like this are fine for multi-tools, but any of the smaller templates with little fiddly bits don't generally fare well. The other thing is a multi-tool like this will be fine, but one of those 5 punch tools, I think Clover make them, doesn't work well on a foam surface. The impact cluster tends to break the needles. So if you want to use a punch tool, which you can by all means, you want to be using something like a rice pad or a felting surface. So okay, which is my good side. There's my good side. You see how lovely and neat all these fibres look on this side. And this is about where we want to be at. We don't want a firm fill. at the moment. I'm going to grab a little bit more of my spare, and I'm just going to fold it over and put it into the tip. So I have folded it over and put it in the tip. Just because I really want a good defined point, but don't overfill it too much. Remember, we are layering, so there's still plenty more to go in there. See how we've got that nice. Okay, so we're still fairly loose on the fill. What we're going to do next is the colour and shading. So you're going to want your French blue and the pastel blue, which is in your kit, and we're going to start laying down the colours and shade. So there's no real weights and measures to this. It is just a pinch. So grab some French blue, which is the darker one, and turn your petal over. So this is the side that has been facing the foam the whole time. So you now want that facing up. Grab your French blue and you just want a bit. It's not a lot. Spread it out. You kind of want to keep it in here. You don't want it going right to the outside. You just want to keep it in that sort of centre. And this is going to form sort of like a dark shade in the middle. And you can bring it down the petal as far as you want. You can see there. It's just quite thin in the middle. You then want to grab your pastel blue, which is the light coloured one, and again it's just a bit, very thin bit, and lay that down on the outsides. So again, long but very, very thin. And lay that down on either side. So I don't know how well the camera's picking this up because it's such a small amount. But we've got our dark blue and then these two very thin lines of the light. Just going to put a tiny little bit more just up near this waistband. This is going to be the waistband of the skirt, so you kind of want the shading to go darker up here a little bit. So what we're going to do now is put this back face down in the template, and we're going to drive the cornflower blue through the colours on the other side. See if I can explain. I don't know if some of you have noticed, but if you just stab it this way, you're just dealing with this colour, and this colour will sit on the top. Whereas if you turn it over and drive this colour through, it kind of diffuses it. It blends the colour a little bit better. So that's hopefully the visual will explain it better than I ever could in words. So there's the colour. We've turned it over. And we're going to drive the cornflower blue through And this is driving. You could use your multi-tool. Don't do it too much, otherwise you will end up with it stuck to the surface. So lift it quite frequently. But do this all the way down the template. There's no colour down here to shade, but you're working it up here, so you need to work it down here as well, otherwise it will become uneven. So I'll lift it again, put it back in. And really driving through. There. And if I turn this over, hopefully you should see that the shading has become sort of diffused. It looks more natural. It's not a rigid line of colour. So you can obviously stab through this way, but when you do, it kind of pulls the top colour. So if I were to take some more of this French blue and lay it down, and then stab through it this way, do you see how it all kind of draws it to its point? So it kind of concentrates that colour. So I find this way is one of the nicest ways of getting a good sort of diffused blend of colour. I hope the camera's really picking this up. So there we go. I'm just going to pop it back in for one final going over. And you don't have to do this part in the template. You can you know, go over it outside of the template. Just remember to keep lifting. If you do that, the only thing I would say is just return it to the template, because it can, when you're not working within these walls, you can go off script a little bit and the shape can become a little bit unruly. So just go round last and just bring it back to the template shape. That way all of your petals are going to be very consistent. There we go. Okay, I'm going to stop fiddling. There you have it. Some beautiful shading going on there. Very subtle, but quite striking. You can make this as bold as you want. I'm going to stick with fairly subtle. And now what we're going to do is insert the wire armature support for the petal that we made. Here's the wire armature that we made. As you can see, it fits very nicely there. Spend a little bit of time just getting your armature in, you know, in the right place. There are wiring holes. I do this in pretty much all of my templates now. You've got a wiring hole. This one, oddly enough, has a wiring hole at both ends. And there is a reason for that. When I designed this, there was we made a daisy from a petal template. It's over on my YouTube channel, and it was made from the snowdrop leaf shape, and the snowdrop petal shape. And this is a very similar shape. So rather than just putting a wiring hole in this end, I put one in this end as well. So you could make a huge daisy with this if you wanted. We're going to have a go at it at some point. But this would make an awesome, you know, massive daisy. I mean, this is probably what, 18 centimeters. So you'd have petal, center, and then petal. It'd be huge. So anyway, I digress. But that's why there's 2 wiring holes in it. Pop your petal in, and I'm just going to lift that a second while I put the template there. So lay that down. With this, you want the supporting armature to be almost up to the end here, very almost right at the very tip, and then these bits you want probably a centimetre in from each side, like so. Pipe cleaners are a little unruly, so they are kind of sticking up all over the place at the moment. But you have the option, you can dot this with some glue, and that's what I'm going to do. I recommend super glue gel. This is one that I use. There is a pen gel that I've got somewhere as well, but I generally recommend a gel rather than the liquid, and the reason for that is that the liquid does tend to run, whereas the gel will sit on the fibres a little bit more, and you just get a little bit of extra working time. So, but just going to fiddle with this. Take your time. You know, don't rush this. Getting the framework in right makes the job a lot easier later on. So what I'm going to do is just dot some glue, glue, and maybe a little bit up in the tip here, just to hold it in place. It probably doesn't need it, but it's not going to hurt. Just going to hold that down. Just give it a few seconds to grab, and then a little bit more, hold that down. And then finally, I'm going to put a little bit in the tip. Like so. I'm just going to hold it there until it's really got that sort of grab. And now what I'm going to do is leave that just for a few minutes for that glue to sort of go off a bit and solidify. So now our glue has set. Like I said, it's optional for putting that in, but I find that it does help just a little bit. You're going to get some more corn flour. Anywhere between 0.8 of a gram and a gram. And this is going to now cover the back, and this doesn't need to be neat. It doesn't matter if your pipe cleaners show through a little bit, because this isn't going to be seen. This part, however, will be seen, because we've got that sort of nice scoop as the skirt sort of comes round and then goes back out. So the underside of this part will be seen. So what we're going to do is pay a little bit of attention to that first. So I'm going to grab a bit of this fluff, take it right down into the tip. Like this. And we're not driving now, we are covering and attaching. You want to make sure you obviously penetrate the fibres from the layer beneath. Okay. And just work up. You don't want to make this too thick, but you want a good covering. You don't want that pipe cleaner showing through. Just going to lift it, make sure nothing's getting stuck. I think it's a safe bet that if you work up to the start of that second loop, then the pipe cleaner has the risk of showing through when you get that curve. So if you make sure that you cover it well up until that point, you should be fine. So there, we've got a nice sort of covering. I'm going to pull off just a little bit more and fill in here. A little bit of a drive through to the other side, just making sure we get some good bond between what we're laying down now and what we laid down before. But not too much because I don't want it sticking to my surface. There, see how that's... The rest of this can just go on. You could multi-tool this maybe. I'm just going to use the single. Lay a bit more down. So obviously make sure you get around the edges. You want a good amount of fibre in the edges. Make them nice and crisp. Lift. Actually, I might bring in my multi-tool. And for a project like this, I do recommend new needles. I'm not an avid follower of new project, new needles, but this is quite a big project. Probably my my most crazy to date, so who knows. Going to just finish off up the top. So my surface tends to wander, as I felt. So if all of a sudden I start going off camera, I do apologise. Right. We are getting there. It's a sort of large congregation of the wires up here, so I'm going to go back to the single needle. And so you don't have to do this in the template. You can do this outside of the template. There we go. It's getting there. So you want to felt this down so that it's not, you don't want a stiff board at this point. You just want, obviously you don't want something that's really fluffy either, but this last little bit is proving to be difficult. Take it out the template and felt it down. It's getting a little bit better. Pop it back in its template. Just make sure you've got the shape refined. If ever you work outside of the template, I think I mentioned this before, just pop it back in at the end. Okay, so I am almost done with this. Lastly, go all over, just refine it down. I'm going to pay a little bit of attention to the tip, and for this I'm just using the tip of the needle. So you want to make sure that everything is felted well. It doesn't have to be... Oops, I picked up a little bit on my surface. It's obviously being a little rough there. So I'm just going to pull that off. I felted some super glue through. There we go. So a little bit of compression with the hands, see where you're at. It's looking quite nice. I think the camera's picking up the shading. Just going to tidy up this outer edge a little bit. Like I said, do take your time with these. They don't take very long. You can kind of production line them. You need to make 7. If you're following the pattern that I've done, then you'll need 7 of these. You can, of course, do more or less depending on your own vision. There. All I'm going to do now is just get my 40 spiral, my thin needle, and I'm just gonna go around very, very lightly, just grabbing those really wild little bits and just bringing them in. It doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to be exact, but you do need to be light with this. Yeah, I'm just doing that. If you were to use a heavier needle and drive it in, what happens is you get an indentation and that's not what we want to happen. We just want to bring in these wild little stray hairs. But don't be too neat and particular about it, because the next step in this process is going to have this all beautifully edged. So I'm going to stop fiddling with that now, and as you can see, the back is just enclosed. You can still see a bit of the pipe cleaner going on here, but that doesn't matter. That's our front side. So now what we're going to do is refine all of these petals and make them all lovely and beautiful with nice crisp edges. You're going to need, as I said, to make 7 of these. So I'm going to go and make 7 of these, but not on camera. And we will come back and I will show you the next step in the process. So to get our petals beautifully thin, we're going to iron them. And this is a very similar technique. It's exactly the same actually as the technique that I've used in my video for pointy feathers, which is on YouTube. And it will turn something like this. If you look at this as it is now, and we'll do a before and after. So my iron is on a cotton setting, so it's quite hot, and you can hear I've got it on a good amount of steam. So I do apologise if any of these cameras fog up while I'm doing this. All you're going to do is just iron it. Good pressure, good steam, both sides. Keep turning it. Obviously don't touch the wire because that is going to be hot, but just all the ways round. There we go. Now, if I can get this to focus, look how thin that is. Look at the surface. Really, really nice thin petal. And then what I would do is just get a pair of scissors and just trim anything that is a bit too far out of place. Look at that edge now. So see these fluffies. You could spend an age trying to needle felt an edge like this, and you would have infinitely more patience than I, but this works. So, but you do however you want, and then you can't beat ironing these. It just, such a time saver. So I've neatened up that edge. I'm just going to go back in with the iron very quickly, seal the deal. And there you have it. Beautifully, beautifully thin petal, really nice smooth surface, and all in a matter of minutes. Okay, so you're going to do this with all of your petals, as am I, but I'm not going to do it on camera. And then we're going to attach them to the waistband. So in this section, we're going to be making the green sort of calyx leaves, sort of part of the BlueBelle. And for that, you're going to need the bright green colour. You're going to need the emerald, and you're going to need this template, and some of you may recognize this template. This is the Pointy Feathers template from the set. It's the 100mm, I believe, which we're going to use. I wanted to try and incorporate some of the other templates into one of these projects so that you can see just how versatile they can be. Right, so I'm going to get my little pocket scales, we're going to weigh out some wool, and we're going to make the next part of the BlueBelle. To start this template, we're going to need, it doesn't use a lot of wool, so 0.5 of a gram is all you need for this. And although this does have that wiring hole, we're not going to be wiring these. I found that they just drape a lot nicer over the top of the skirt if they're not wired. You can of course wire yours if you want them to curl certain ways. Then you are probably going to want to put in a pipe cleaner or maybe a 24 gauge florist wire will hold that quite nicely, but we're not going to wire. As always with the templates, pull off a little bit just so you've got some a bit to sort of backfill with if you've got any thin spots, and then spread out the fibre in the template so that it's fairly even, and then grab your needle. We're going to start at the tip, I'm going to go in with my 38 spiral. Just start at the tip and then work around the outside, getting everything in the template walls. Not a hard felt at the moment, just that light tack to the surface. Get it back in. Bring a little bit more light down here, see if that helps. So we want it retaining its shape, but not really firmly felted. And take it up into the little notch at the end here. There we go. So I don't know if you can see, I've got a bit of a thin spot there. So back into the template, and again we're doing all of the felting from this side, we're not turning it over, at least not at the moment. So just feed that where I want a bit extra. Keep lifting it from the surface. Yeah, that's better. Just going all over. Firming it up a little bit, and that's where we want it to be at. It's a little bit blobby, but we're going to add in a little shock of colour, so I don't want it too firmly felted at the moment. And if you turn it over again, like with the skirt petals, you can see this side is very, very nice and neat. So turn it over so you've got nice side towards you. So we've been felting with that side face down, but now we're going to flip it over. Grab your bright green, pull out a pinch. It's really not very much of this. It's very intense green. And then we're just going to lay it down, spread it out and lay it down. I might put a little bit more over there, like that. A couple of light tacking stabs just to hold it in place. And flip the whole thing over, and like we did with the skirt petals, we're going to drive these fibres through from the other side, and that's going to diffuse the colour, make it a little less blocky. I'm going to work all over. Remember to lift because we're driving with our needle now. And if you look now on the other side, you can see that it's a lot more faded. So now I'm going to felt on this side a little bit. And if you think, you know, that's too subtle, I want it brighter, just add in some more, flip it over and drive through again. And you work this until, you know, you're happy. This is going to stand out. It's going to look beautiful on the top of the skirt. So pay a little bit of time to it. I'm going through both sides now, driving the fibres each way. So I want a good blend. So there we go, you can see it's nice and diffused. There's no real hard lines of colour. There, as you can see. Let's get a close up. So it's just a nice light shock of colour on this kind of calyx leaf. My flower terminology hasn't improved. There. And once you're happy with your colour, so I'm going to add in a little bit more, you're going to recreate this. How many more times is it? Let me just check. Yeah, it's 7 times, so you're going to want 7 of these. One thing that I forgot to mention while I was creating these is you need to create left and right versions of them. There are 7 in total, so you're going to need 3 with the curve going one way and 4 with the curve going the other way. So as you work them around the skirt, they're all going to be sort of facing towards the front. So this is just going to affect which side you put your sort of light shock of green colour on. So 3 of one and 4 of the other. So there we go, going in both sides. And that is the calyx done. So I'm just going to rub that with my hands, get a little bit of compression so we can see what we're dealing with. So there we go. Just going to tidy up around these sides, and again, you don't want to fill up the template with this. These are all very, very delicate accents on the outside, so 0.5 grams This one might actually be a touch on the thin side, but can always add this extra little bit on the back that we had left over. So nice crisp tip. It's all important. Then just adding in the leftover little bit. Oops. Like so. That's better. There. Okay, so 6 more of those, and then we're going to iron them all exactly the same as we did with the skirt petals, and that'll be the next thing done and ready to assemble. Okay, so very quick overview of ironing these parts. Exactly the same. We're just going to get an iron on. I've got this on a cotton setting, steaming away. Flip it over, iron both sides, and that is going to come out beautifully thin. I'm going to sort of quickly run through how to make the leaf. Some of you may recognise this template as the leaf template that's included in the daffodil kit. There is a more in-depth instruction on how to fill and wire this leaf, which is on the YouTube channel on the daffodil tutorial video. I'm going to do this very, very quickly, but if you do need slightly more instruction, then check out that video. There are timestamps in the description box under the video, and you can jump to the section that you want to review. To fill this template, you're going to need about 1 gram of the emerald. This makes all of the sort of the curlies and swirlies and wings and things on the BlueBelle. So you're going to need 2, 4, 6, 8 of them, I think it is. Yes, 8. And I'm going to show you how to do this one. Grab 1 gram of the emerald and then split it into 2. So you've got 2 0.5 grams. And take the first half, spread it out nice and evenly throughout the template, and then just stuff it in. And I'm going to start it this corner, this point, and work your way all the way down the template. I am going to do this very quick and crude, but you can spend a little more time on it. Just going to lift, pop it back in, and the way to get these back into the corners, if you try and shove that up there, it won't go. So bring it down to a wider point, push it in, and then slide it up. Work all the way down. And then when you get to this end, bring the fibres in. I'm so off the end of my mat here, bear with me. There we go. So work up to the other end. And again, pay a little bit of attention to the tip. One end, you will need the tip to be really crisp. The other end, for this project, doesn't matter so much. So pick which tip end looks the best when you're done. And that's going to form the point that you'll see. Okay, so back out the template, back in the template. And just firm it up, not rigid. You still need a bit of loose in the fibres. And this is a very long template. It's about 19 centimetres, I think. So there we go. This is so crude. So we've got it, the first bit, and then decide which end, which tip, like this one. So this one has got a wiring hole in one end. So you want your good finishing tip will be at the other end. So I'm going to use this one, pull it back in. And then we're going to pop in the wire. And the wire is I believe it's a 22 gauge. So to do this, I just lift very slightly, just push your fibres out the way and slide the wire in. If you just push it in, you're likely to just catch your fibres and push everything that way. So like so. Get your wire to the end. Now there are a few ways that you can do this. You can bend this end back ever so slightly so that you don't have a pointy tip, but you need to be careful because obviously you're getting up into a very, very thin point and you don't want the wire to bulk that out. I'm just going to go with a straight tip, and I'm going to glue this wire in place using a little bit of the super glue gel. Which I have here. I'm just going to dot a little bit of glue there, a little bit of glue up near the end, and boop, and that's it. I'm going to use the other end of my needle just to poke this back in. And then just to hold it down very close to the glue, just for a few seconds. Trying not to stick myself to it, which is what I often do. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for a few minutes just to allow the glue to go off, and then we're going to come back and do exactly the same again and put another 0.5 grams over the top of this. So this has been sitting here for probably not long enough, but I don't have much patience, as many of you will know. So I'm going to just pull off a little bit, spread out the rest evenly, and then this can go in and be used to fill out. So again, pick a side to start. I usually start at the base. Just start bringing those fibres in. I'm using my 38 spiral, which is a little bit of a workhorse for me. And now you want to take a little bit of time. You've got a wire in there, so be gentle. I'm not even hitting my foam mat. I'm just penetrating that lower level of fibres, getting this attached. And for those of you who are newer to felting, don't be afraid of the wires. We all get needle breakages, but what you want to do is just hold your needle loosely. If you have a lot of tension in your hand, you're straining and you're stabbing very hard, that's an awful lot of work, and you're only going to put a lot of strain on your hand and your shoulder and your neck. So just a nice loose grip. That way, if you hit the template, your needle will slip out the top of your hand. So don't grip onto it really tight. Let the needle do the work. So just working up I think my needle is failing me. It's not as grippy, so I might need to replace that with a new one in a minute, but work your way up. I probably got some super glue on it. Yeah, I can feel the barbs are almost non-existent, and this is why we wait for the glue to dry. So I've grabbed another needle. That's much better. The fun of needle felting with super glue when it's not dry. There we go. Right up to the tip. Just get that. And then just go back down over the whole thing. Now you can start compacting the fibres down into the template a little more. And we're going to iron these as well, so don't worry about having to try and get them super thin on the felting. Oh, my wire's bouncing around. There we go. Like I said, little quick and crude. Turn it over and then just felt back the other side, and that should be enough, because we're going to iron these and make them all thin and lovely. You're not going to need much in the way of, you know, real refined edges. So there we go. Like I said, very quick and crude for this video purposes. There's a little more information. I do this a little slower, I think, over on the DAF tutorial, but So you're going to need 8 of these in total. So we'll make those, we'll iron them, and then we're going to be on to the assembly part. Okay, so we've got the iron fired up on a hot setting. I'm on a cotton setting, and we've got a bit of steam going. And like everything else, we're just going to, good amount of pressure, not too much motion. You just want to get those fibres really flattened. There we go. Look at that, how thin that is. Wafer thin. Obviously do be aware that you've got a wire stuck out here, so don't pick it up by that when you've been ironing. There we go. So you're going to do all of that, or you're going to do that to all of your 8 curly leaves. Then we will trim and just neaten up those edges like we did with the skirt petals and the others. Just trim back those really unruly bits so you've got a nice edge. So do that to all 8, and then we're going to start assembling our BlueBelle.